The aroma of rosemary pot roast drifted through my parents' kitchen, blending with the faint citrus of the cleaner Mom always used before guests arrived. Sunday dinners at the Pierce house, now the Thompsons of Lakeview Ridge, were as predictable as the rain in Seattle. I stood at the long oak table, aligning the forks just so, like muscle memory from my teenage years. The polished surface reflected my face, older, steadier, and, to everyone here, still invisible. From the living room came the familiar, high-pitched laughter of my younger sister Madison, her voice threaded with the self-assurance of someone who had never been told no. 32,000 followers, she announced, waving her phone like a trophy. The sponsorship deal with Glowkind went through this morning. Dad's approving chuckle rolled from his recliner. That's my girl. You keep at it, kiddo. Mom appeared in the doorway, hands clasped in her apron, beaming as if Madison had cured cancer. Hard work always pays off, she said sweetly. Then her eyes flicked toward me, softening into that practiced politeness she reserved for her older daughter. Alex, could you grab the serving spoons? Sure, I murmured. I set them beside the casserole dish and slid into my seat, 27 years old and still performing the ritual choreography of family dinners, each movement small enough not to draw attention. The first bite of pot roast hadn't cooled before I felt it, the subtle shift in air that preceded one of Mom's talks. She cleared her throat, offering me a gentle smile that made my stomach tighten. Honey, we wanted to discuss something about your room. I looked up, fork midair. The lighting in Madison's room isn't ideal for her videos, Mom continued, exchanging a glance with Dad. We thought, since you're spending most of your time working remotely, maybe you could move your things to the den. Madison could use your old space for her studio. Before I could reply, Dad set down his fork with finality. It's time you got your own place anyway, Alex. You've been here long enough. The words landed like cold water on skin. Expected, yet still shocking. Across the table, Madison grinned, twisting a strand of her perfectly curled hair. I promise I'll keep it organized, she said, feigning innocence. You know, so it looks good when I film. No one noticed how my hand trembled slightly as I set my fork down. I pressed my napkin against my lips to hide the flicker of emotion threatening to escape. They waited for a reaction. Tears, protest, anything to affirm the old script. Instead, I chewed slowly, swallowed, and met their eyes. I'll think about it, I said evenly. Madison blinked, thrown off by my calm. Dad gave a curt nod, satisfied that the issue was settled. Conversation resumed. Vacation plans, follower counts, interest rates. Each word a blur. I tuned them out, focusing instead on the muted tick of the clock above the fireplace. Every tick echoed a thought I'd been avoiding for years. This house isn't home anymore. After dinner, as the others cleared plates, I slipped away to the hallway mirror. My reflection met me with steady eyes and the faintest trace of a smile. The girl who once swallowed every slight had grown into a woman quietly charting her own course. Upstairs, my room, still mine for now, smelled faintly of cedar and old books. I ran my hand along the desk where I'd spent countless nights building a business my family didn't even know existed. On the laptop screen, market charts glowed like constellations, familiar and grounding. Numbers didn't care about favoritism or appearances, they only respected discipline. I opened the folder labeled Future Moves, scanning the apartment listings I'd bookmarked earlier that week. I'd been browsing them without purpose before. Tonight, purpose found me. Downstairs, Madison's laughter floated upward, bright and careless. I closed the laptop, exhaled slowly, and whispered into the quiet. Soon. Outside, Lakeview Ridge shimmered beneath the misty Seattle dusk. The neighborhood lights reflected on wet pavement like scattered stars. For years I'd believed escape meant distance. Now I understood. It meant direction. T.I. woke to the soft percussion of Seattle rain working its way down the gutter outside my window. The house on Lakeview Ridge always sounded calmer in the mornings, as if it forgot how loudly it performed on Sundays. For once, no one stood in the hallway reminding me that being helpful made me lovable. It was just me, my steady breath, and the faint afterscent of cedar that clung to my room. I swung my feet to the floor and opened the bottom dresser drawer, the one that stuck halfway and required a small, stubborn tug to surrender. Beneath the old sweaters lay the shoebox I hadn't touched in a year. I set it on the desk, the way a curator sets a relic beneath glass, and lifted the lid. The first thing on top was a postcard from my freshman year economics professor. Black ink slanted and confident. Alexandra, your analysis reads like someone who actually listens to the numbers. I had tacked that card above my dorm desk until the tape yellowed. Under it, the certificate from the state math competition. Second place, but I remembered the solution they couldn't find, the one that arrived for me 2 minutes too late. Applause always seemed to belong to someone who spoke louder. There were other artifacts. A folded program from the honors banquet, a scholarship offer printed on thin institutional paper, and a letter from the nonprofit where I interned. The program listed Alexandra Thompson among achievements that once felt like trailheads, not detours. The scholarship letter congratulated me in bureaucratic prose for earning what no one could take. I ran my thumb along the crease until the paper softened, wondering how I had ever learned to apologize for being disciplined. Someone patted down the hallway. I paused, listening for Madison's sing-song voice or Dad's heavy morning cough. Only the rain answered. I pulled out the last item, a composition notebook with a turquoise spine and a coffee stain across the corner. The year written on the front made my stomach tighten. I'd filled it during the summer after college. Budgets, timelines, a column titled Clients, Potential, with a neat list of names and dates I'd cold emailed, hands shaking over the send button. The handwriting grows tidier as the pages turn, confidence developing the way a muscle does, through repetition and burn. On page 37, there's a line in block letters. Visibility is not a favor. I remembered writing it after an afternoon in this very kitchen when I'd explained a contract I'd landed and Mom said, "That's cute." The words had burned then. Now they read like instructions. A car door thumped outside. The neighbor across the street hauled a briefcase to his trunk, the umbrella tilting against his shoulder. Through my rain-streaked window, Lakeview Ridge was a watercolor of dark roofs and glistening pavement. If I bought a house here, would this view look different from the other side of the street? Would it feel like a choice instead of a compromise? I stacked the letters in a new order, chronology replaced by intention. On top, the scholarship. Under it, the professor's postcard. Then the internship letter. I slid the competition certificate in last, not because it mattered least, but because it reminded me of what timing steals when you wait for permission. My phone buzzed. A notification from Madison's story. A boomerang of yesterday's pot roast with glitter text. Sunday traditions. Big changes coming. I watched the loop twice, felt the familiar tug toward resentment, then let the screen go dark. A loop is not a life. Downstairs, the house groaned. Old wood settling in damp weather. I made coffee and stood at the sink while it dripped, breathing the bitterness in like resolve. I brought the mug back up with me and opened my laptop. In the folder named Future Moves, the saved listings waited like small doors. Last night I'd skimmed them like a fantasy. This morning the fantasy had edges. A craftsman in Bothell with a narrow porch. A townhome in Kirkland with 2 white walls. And then the one I hadn't dared click. A pale gray house on a street parallel to ours, visible between 2 maples if you stood at the right angle on our front walk. The photos were ordinary. 2 bedrooms, a small office with a window that faced the street. Scuffed floors, nothing glamorous. But the listing made a promise in its own unremarkable way. Space that belongs to you. I pictured myself packing this room into boxes, this desk and the shoebox and the notebook with the turquoise spine. I pictured not asking for help and not being scolded for refusing it. I pictured a key turning, not to gain entry, but to claim it. The door tapped once and opened a few inches. "You're up?" Mom's voice, bright with that careful, practiced cheer. "Yeah," I said, "just sorting things." She stepped in, eyes scanning the desk, the open shoebox, the letters like a dossier. "You've kept all that?" she asked, smiling in a way that was more puzzled than pleased. "They're reminders," I said, returning the scholarship letter to the stack. Of what? I met her gaze. Of who I've always been. Something passed over her face. Confusion, maybe. Maybe the discomfort that arrives when a story refuses to behave. She smoothed her sweater. Well, she said, too lightly, your sister will need measurements for the ring light. If you can start moving the bigger things this week, that would be helpful. I nodded as if taking a polite note. She left, the door clicking shut with careful finality. I slid the shoebox back into the drawer and closed it. On the desk, I placed the turquoise notebook in the center and wrote today's date at the top of a blank page. Then, in the cleanest hand I could manage, I wrote 3 lines. 1. Call the realtor. 2. Print financials. 3. Choose myself. The rain lightened. Somewhere down the block, a dog shook itself awake and barked into the soft morning. I capped the pen, finished my coffee, and opened the listing again. Independence didn't feel like anger anymore. It felt like a door I could finally reach. I clicked Contact Agent and filled in the fields with steady fingers. When the last box asked Preferred Viewing Time, I typed Soon. By Tuesday evening, the rain had eased into a fine mist. Seattle's way of reminding you that nothing here ever truly stops, just softens. I sat at my small apartment's kitchen counter, laptop open, the glow from the screen casting a steady light across the stack of invoices beside my coffee mug. Numbers danced in tidy rows. Payments received, projections met, client accounts stable. To anyone else, it might have looked like a freelancer's ledger. To me, it was evidence of a quiet empire. 3 years ago, Thompson Financial Consulting had been nothing more than a folder of spreadsheets and a borrowed laptop. Now, it supported 12 long-term clients across 4 states. I scrolled through the dashboards I'd built myself, graphs rising like mountain peaks, while outside the windows the city lights blurred against the damp glass. A notification chimed. Monthly earnings report available. I clicked it open. Net income surpassed projections by 8%. The figure didn't thrill me the way it once had. Satisfaction had shifted into something steadier, like trust. I could depend on myself. Still, the timing of Sunday's dinner replayed in my mind. Dad's offhand, "Time you got your own place." Mom's sweet persuasion dressed as reason. Madison's careless smirk. The pattern was ancient, but now I had the means to end it. My phone vibrated with a text from Madison. "Need your help with a brand brief. You're good with numbers, right?" No hi, no please. I stared at it for a long second, then typed back. "Busy with client work tonight. Congrats on the sponsorship." The 3 dots blinked, vanished. No reply. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders to shake off the old instinct to make myself useful. Independence, I was learning, wasn't only financial. It was the refusal to trade peace for approval. At 8, I joined a video call with a new client in Portland, a startup founder anxious about her runway. "You'll be fine," I said, guiding her through projections, showing her how to see possibilities instead of deficits. When she smiled, relief softening her face, I caught my own reflection in the dark screen, a calm professional whose voice didn't shake anymore. After the call, I updated my ledgers, checked the brokerage account, and opened a second browser tab. Property listings. Lakeview Ridge area. The same pale gray house from yesterday appeared at the top of the feed. 2 bedrooms, an office, modest yard. I enlarged the photo of the front porch and imagined coffee steam rising into morning fog. Close enough to my parents' street to be visible. Far enough to be mine. I hesitated, cursor hovering over the schedule viewing button. Did I really want to live that near to them? But the thought wasn't vindictive, it was symbolic. For years they had treated proximity as control. I wanted proximity as proof. I could exist in full view and owe them nothing. The phone rang. Mom's name lit the screen. I debated letting it ring out, but answered, unwilling to feed her drama by avoidance. "Hi, sweetheart," she began, voice sugar smooth. "Just checking in. Your sister's planning her studio layout. She might need help moving some of your things this weekend." "I haven't decided about moving yet," I said evenly. "Oh, don't take it personally," she replied, the laugh brittle. "You know how important this is for her career." "I do. I sipped coffee, eyes on the rising trend line of my revenue graph. I also know how important my work is for mine. A pause, long enough for understanding to flicker and fade. Of course, she said finally. Anyway, dinner Sunday, same time. After the call, I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting silence reclaim the apartment. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space where Apology used to live. I'd once measured success by their acknowledgement. Now I measured it by the quiet that followed standing my ground. I poured another cup of coffee and looked out at the city below. Headlights threading between wet streets, each car heading somewhere it chose. My own path stretched before me, mapped not by approval but by precision. Savings balanced, options open, courage compounded. I opened my notebook, the turquoise one from my old room, and wrote across the page, "Freedom requires structure." Then, beneath it, "Tomorrow. Contact realtor. Confirm viewing." The mist outside thickened again, silvering the world. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped between expectations. I felt positioned. The difference was everything. Saturday morning light filtered through the blinds in soft gray stripes. I had spent the week reviewing contracts and replying to clients, keeping myself too busy to think about the phone call I'd eventually have to make. By now, the realtor had responded to my message with 2 available viewing slots, Monday at 10 a.m. or Wednesday afternoon. I hadn't confirmed yet. Something in me wanted one more look at the world I was preparing to leave. When I arrived at my parents' house, the smell of bleach and cinnamon candles met me at the door. Mom always scrubbed when she was nervous. Dad sat at the kitchen table in his usual weekend uniform, pressed jeans, flannel shirt, the morning paper folded in perfect thirds. Madison leaned against the counter, scrolling her phone, a coffee in one hand and a glossy measuring tape in the other. "Morning," I said, hanging my coat. Mom glanced up. "Oh, good, you're here. We were just talking about the studio setup." I poured myself a glass of water, waited. Madison looked up from her phone, all bright teeth and confidence. "I measured the window in your room. It's perfect for natural light. We just need to repaint, maybe white or blush. It'll pop on camera." I turned toward her slowly. "You measured my room?" "Mom said it was okay," she answered quickly, tone light but eyes avoiding mine. "You know, since you'll be moving soon anyway." Dad cleared his throat. "We thought it best to start planning now. The sooner we get Madison's career properly launched, the sooner things will settle. It's all about efficiency." Efficiency. As if emotions were assets to be reallocated. I set my glass down. "I haven't decided about moving yet." Mom's smile tightened. "Honey, you can't stay here forever. You're 27. You're so capable. You should be out there building your life." "I am building my life," I said quietly. Dad folded the newspaper, aligning the edges. "Then it's time to show it. You're a grown woman. You shouldn't be hiding in your old room." The comment struck harder than it should have. Hiding. That's what they thought I'd been doing. Shrinking in a corner while they built their perfect image around Madison's ring light and filters. I took a slow breath. "I'm not hiding," I said. "I'm preparing." Mom sighed, the sound that always followed when she realized conversation wasn't going to script. "Alex, please don't make this difficult. We just want what's best for everyone." "For everyone," I repeated. "Not for me." Madison set down her tape measure, bristling. "Why are you acting like this is personal? I'm finally doing something important." "Good for you," I said, meaning it more than she realized. But that doesn't mean my space stops belonging to me. Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me as if I were an errant spreadsheet. "You've always been too sensitive about these things." Too sensitive. The phrase was a trigger I'd memorized, the family's coded way of saying, "You feel more than we want you to." I looked at them, really looked. Mom's anxious smile, Dad's tidy disappointment, Madison's self-satisfied certainty. They had written me into a role years ago, and every time I spoke differently, they mistook it for rebellion instead of growth. "I'll move," I said finally, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice, but on my timeline. Mom brightened instantly. "That's wonderful. When do you think? I'll let you know, I interrupted, and I'll handle it myself. She blinked, then laughed a little too loudly. Of course, darling, whatever you want. But she didn't understand what I'd just said. I hadn't promised them Madison's studio. I'd promised myself freedom. I spent another hour pretending to help with lunch prep, listening to Madison talk about sponsorship contracts she didn't understand. Dad offered marketing advice he'd pulled from an article. Their words blurred into static while I mentally arranged my next steps. Finalize Monday's viewing, review financial documents tonight, and call Chloe to help pack the essentials. When I finally left, the rain had returned, a thin, steady drizzle. I paused on the porch, looking out across Lakeview Ridge. The air smelled of wet cedar and the faint metallic tang of freedom. Behind me, through the front window, my family moved in practiced choreography. 3 people circling a dream that no longer included me. I walked to my car, keys clenched tight, and whispered the only audit that mattered. Assets: clarity, independence, resilience. Liabilities: approval, guilt, fear. The numbers balanced perfectly. That night, I couldn't sleep. My parents' words replayed like static, phrases polished by habit until they felt rehearsed. It's time, Dad had said. Don't make it difficult, Mom had added. Beneath the politeness was an order dressed as care. But I was done performing gratitude for eviction notices disguised as guidance. By midnight, I had my laptop open again, the soft glow lighting the corner of my small kitchen. I sipped from a chipped mug and opened the browser tab I'd been avoiding. Lakeview Ridge real estate listings. There it was, the same pale gray house across the street from my parents' neighborhood, listed just yesterday. A modest 2-bedroom with an office space and a small yard. The price tag was steep, but comfortably within reach. I'd planned my finances meticulously. I knew how to forecast risk better than anyone in that house ever would. I clicked Schedule Viewing and filled in the form with calm precision. When the form asked for a preferred date, I selected Monday at 10 a.m., the same slot I'd been hesitating to claim. The confirmation email arrived instantly, as though the universe had been waiting for me to decide. Then I texted Chloe, my best friend and former coworker, the only person who'd seen the full shape of my ambition. Me. I'm buying a house. Keep it quiet for now. Chloe. Finally! Do you need help? Me. Not yet. Just moral support. Chloe. Always. And champagne for the closing. I smiled, a quiet curve of satisfaction. My parents had taught me silence as survival. I'd turned it into strategy. The next morning, I packed an overnight bag with a few essentials, just enough to justify being busy if anyone asked where I was. I left early, the gray Seattle sky hanging low and reflective. The drive to the viewing was short, 7 minutes, 1 left turn, a literal line between who I'd been and who I was becoming. The realtor, Marjorie Klein, greeted me with an easy professionalism. "You're Alexandra?" she asked, clipboard in hand. "Yes," I said. "Just Alex is fine." She led me through the small entryway into the living room, where dust motes floated in the weak morning light. "The owner's relocating to Portland," she explained. "They've kept the property in good condition. It's a quiet street, mostly families." I walked slowly through each room, tracing my fingertips along window frames, testing the quiet. The house smelled of cedar and faint detergent, a comforting neutrality. From the front window, I could just glimpse the maple trees that marked the border of my parents' street. Standing there, I imagined future mornings, the clink of a coffee mug, emails open, the satisfaction of ownership. No one above me asking for permission. No one below expecting gratitude. Marjorie turned to me. "It's within your budget, correct?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Would you like to make an offer?" I hesitated just long enough to feel the thrill of decision. "Yes, full asking." Her brows rose slightly. "Confident." "Prepared," I corrected. We spent the next half hour filling out forms. My hands didn't tremble. When I handed the signed offer back, It felt like sliding a chapter across a desk and turning the page. Driving back through Lakeview Ridge, I slowed near my parents' house. Madison's car sat in the driveway, hatch open, boxes labeled studio props. Through the window, I saw Dad helping her measure something, his expression proud and absorbed. Mom stood nearby, nodding at paint swatches. They didn't look up as I passed. For once, that didn't sting. It steadied me. When I reached my apartment, I opened the turquoise notebook and wrote 3 lines. Offers submitted. Confidence, 100%. Emotional cost, minimal. ROI, freedom. I laughed softly. It's not revenge, I said. Though part of me knew it was something adjacent, something quieter, cleaner. It's visibility. That night I slept soundly for the first time in months. The future no longer felt like theory. It had a roof, a street number, and a front door waiting for my key. By Monday morning, Seattle's mist had settled into a thin, almost metallic fog that blurred the edges of everything. I took it as a sign. Clarity would have to be earned. My phone buzzed before coffee finished brewing. Marjorie Klein. Offer accepted. Congrats, homeowner. I read it twice. The words barely sinking in before a laugh escaped me. Sharp, unguarded, real. For years, validation had been a ration I begged for. Now it came signed and notarized. I texted Chloe. Me. Offer accepted. Chloe. So when do we toast? Me. After I figure out how to move a life without anyone noticing. Chloe. You? You'll turn it into a spreadsheet. She wasn't wrong. By noon, my laptop was open to a document titled Operation Invisible Exit. Each tab had color-coded columns. Items to pack, items to replace, cover stories. If my family had built a religion around appearance, I had built a science around discretion. That afternoon, I visited a few more open houses with Marjorie, just to keep up the facade of indecision. It was better if no one suspected how close to home my real purchase was. At each stop, I took photos, nodded politely, and asked about HOA fees like any other cautious buyer. But my mind stayed anchored on the gray house, my house, 2 streets over, the one I'd already claimed in silence. By the third property, Marjorie smiled knowingly. You're humoring me, aren't you? Maybe a little, I admitted. I've worked with a lot of buyers, she said. The decisive ones are rare. You remind me of someone who's already solved the math before stepping into the room. That's about right, I said. When I left her office, the sun had broken through just enough to turn the wet sidewalks into mirrors. I stopped at a cafe, Crimson Cup, the same one Madison liked to photograph for her feed. I ordered black coffee, no sugar, and sat by the window, watching people rush past. A girl at the next table rehearsed lines for an audition, mouthing words with quiet urgency. For a moment, I saw a younger version of myself, earnest, trying to earn space in a world that spoke over her. I smiled, not at pity but recognition. My phone lit again. Mom. I ignored it. Then a text followed. Dad wants to know if you can come Sunday. Madison's room looks amazing already. The irony almost made me laugh. She'd started painting before I'd even moved out. I typed a simple reply. Busy this weekend. Big project due. A lie, but not entirely. Freedom was the biggest project I'd ever undertaken. Later that evening, I drove through Lakeview Ridge, pretending to be any other commuter. The neighborhood looked different through this new lens. Each porch light a boundary. Each mailbox a symbol of ownership. When I slowed near the gray house, I saw the sold sticker plastered diagonally across the sign. My chest tightened, not with fear, but disbelief. The world hadn't ended. It had simply rearranged itself around a decision I'd made quietly. Across the street, my parents' house glowed in the dusk. Through the bay window, I spotted Madison adjusting her ring light, Dad fiddling with a tripod. They looked so sure of themselves, so convinced of their storyline. It occurred to me how much energy they spent curating the illusion of success while I'd been building the real thing in the shadows. I parked a few houses down, engine off, watching them from a respectful distance. I didn't feel resentment anymore, just distance, measured not in feet but in perspective. Eli's inclusion wasn't a mistake. My younger brother had always seen more than he said. His silence an ally, not a weapon. He'd ask questions, yes, but he'd keep them safe. When I closed the notebook, I caught my reflection in the dark laptop screen. Composed, resolute, faintly smiling. The woman looking back didn't need permission. Outside, the fog returned, blurring the skyline into soft silver. I let the window stay open a crack, the cold air threading through the quiet apartment like proof of change. Somewhere nearby, traffic hummed. A city moving forward, indifferent yet endless. Tomorrow, I'd start packing. Tomorrow, I'd measure the walls of my own house. But tonight, I allowed myself to stand perfectly still, holding the rare silence of a secret that was finally mine. Wednesday morning dawned sharp and clear, the kind of rare Seattle light that made even the dampest streets shimmer. I woke early, heart already steady, mind rehearsing every detail. By noon, the paperwork would be final. The gray house on Hawthorne Lane, my house, would no longer be a secret plan. It would be a signature away from truth. I brewed coffee and opened my email. Marjorie had sent the final contract for review. I scanned it line by line, every clause like a quiet victory. No cosigners, no family guarantees, just my name, Alexandra Thompson, and a string of digits that meant freedom could be financed. At 9, I printed the documents and slid them into a leather folder. The ritual felt ceremonial, like sealing a future in ink. Outside, fog clung to the street, softening edges but not erasing direction. Before leaving, I texted Chloe. Signing today. Don't jinx it. Girl, you already did the hard part. The rest is just penmanship. She wasn't wrong. At Marjorie's office downtown, the lobby smelled faintly of rain and new carpet. Congratulations, Alex, she said, offering a pen with a small flourish. You've been one of the calmest buyers I've ever worked with. I practice financial meditation, I joked, signing the final line. When it was done, she shook my hand. Welcome home. Those 2 words landed heavier than expected. Home. Not the one I was born into, but the one I'd built with spreadsheets, restraint, and silent resolve. I drove toward Lakeview Ridge slower than usual, the folder on the passenger seat like a companion. My parents' street appeared around the bend, familiar yet distant. As I passed their house, I noticed Madison out front, posing beside a tripod while Dad adjusted lighting angles. Her laughter cut through the air, bright as ever. For once, it didn't sting. My phone rang. Mom. I hesitated, then answered. Hi, sweetheart. You sound busy. I am, actually. Errands. Oh, work errands? Something like that. Well, she continued, we're redecorating the den since you'll be moving soon. Madison needs storage space for her, what do you call them? Brand kits? I smiled, unseen. I'm sure you'll make it beautiful. Don't forget dinner Sunday, she added. Your sister wants to show off the new studio. I promised nothing, only murmured, we'll see, before hanging up. The road curved and then my house came into view, the gray siding catching a sliver of light through the fog. I parked in the empty driveway, stepped out, and stood in silence. The air smelled like wet pine and change. Inside, the floors creaked in a way that felt intimate rather than worn. Light filtered through bare windows, soft and new. I walked from room to room, the kitchen with its narrow counter, the office with its single window overlooking the street, the small bedroom that already felt like refuge. From the front window, I could see my parents' street in the distance. Not close enough to trap me, but close enough to remind me of what I'd outgrown. I ran my hand along the cool wall and whispered, "We're going to be okay." By the time I returned to the car, my phone buzzed again. It was Chloe, asking if I actually did it and when we could celebrate. I laughed, a sound that startled me with its ease. That evening, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by half-packed boxes. The hum of the city faded under the rhythm of tape stretching over cardboard. Each seal felt like closure. Each labeled box, office, books, kitchen essentials. A declaration that my life could stand on its own scaffolding. Before bed, I opened my turquoise notebook and wrote, "Transaction complete. Keys pending Friday. Emotional forecast, calm with increasing confidence. Note, independence signed, sealed, delivered." Then, almost as an afterthought, I added a line at the bottom. Visibility doesn't require an audience. It requires courage. When I closed the notebook, the room felt larger, the air lighter. I lay back on the couch, boxes framing me like walls of potential, and listened to the rain begin again outside. It didn't sound like melancholy anymore. It sounded like applause in disguise. Thursday morning arrived with the crisp certainty of a new password, unguessable to anyone but me. I woke before my alarm and lay still for a minute, listening to the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement 5 floors below. The city sounded like a secret kept well. Coffee first, then logistics. I opened my laptop and pulled up the tab I'd bookmarked. Utilities, start service. It felt almost ceremonial. Power, water, internet. Mundane words that, in sequence, spelled autonomy. I typed the new address, double-checked Friday's start time, 10 a.m., and clicked confirm. A small banner popped up. "Welcome to your new home." I exhaled, slow and steady. Next, homeowner's insurance. The agent on the phone spoke in quick, cheerful bursts. "Replacement cost or actual cash value?" "Replacement," I said. "I'm building, not bargaining." While she read disclosures, I scanned my spreadsheet labeled Operation Invisible Exit. Every row had a status: green for completed, amber for pending, red for dependencies. Utilities glowed green now. Internet scheduled for a noon install. Locks to be rekeyed at 2. Movers, 2 men and a small truck, booked for Friday morning, selected specifically for their reputation. Efficient, discreet, no small talk. At 9, I met Marjorie downtown for the final walkthrough paperwork, a finality disguised as routine. She slid the last document across the conference table and smiled. "It's a pleasure dealing with someone who reads before signing." "Occupational hazard," I said, and signed where the yellow flags told me to. Ink, initials, date. Each stroke was calmer than the last. Marjorie walked me out to the lobby. "Keys tomorrow, 10 sharp," she said. "I'll meet you at the property to hand them off personally." I nodded. Perfect. My phone buzzed the moment I stepped onto the sidewalk. Mom. I considered letting it ring, then answered. It was better to control the story by giving her nothing to investigate. "Hi, sweetheart," she chirped. "Quick question. Do you know where you packed your old textbooks? Madison wants to stack them under her tripod for height." "I haven't packed yet," I said evenly. "And the books are staying with me." A tiny pause. "Oh, well, we just thought—" "Never mind. Are you coming Sunday?" "I have a deadline," I said. "I'll let you know." She filled the silence with her favorite sound. Curated optimism. "We're so proud of the way you're helping your sister." "I'm proud of the way I'm helping myself," I said, too softly for it to be a declaration, loud enough for it to be true. I hung up before she could translate that into something prettier. Back at my apartment, I hauled 2 flattened cardboard boxes from the closet and began folding, the tape gun clicking like a metronome. Office, essentials, kitchen, first night. I handled each object like a witness. The turquoise notebook, the ledger I'd kept since the first client paid on time, a framed photo Chloe took of me laughing in a cafe before I knew how expensive visibility could be. A knock at the door. When I opened it, Eli stood there with a grocery bag and a sheepish smile. "I brought fuel," he said, lifting the bag. "Protein bars and those fancy sparkling waters you like." "You're either psychic or spying," I said, stepping aside. "Process of elimination," he said. "Mom said you were busy and sounded like she was auditioning for a toothpaste commercial. That usually means you're doing something important." He set the bag down and took in the boxes, the neatly labeled stacks. His eyebrows shot up. You're really doing it. I nodded. Tomorrow, keep it quiet? He put a hand over his heart. You have my silence. We packed side by side for an hour, the kind of companionable quiet only siblings can manage. He didn't pepper me with questions. He didn't offer advice. He just handed me tape when I reached for it and asked, now and then, fragile or fold? It felt like an apology for every dinner he hadn't been old enough to rewire. When we took a break, he leaned against the counter. You know they'll pretend they helped you do this, he said. After. I know. I twisted the cap off a bottle of sparkling water. They can have the story. I'll keep the deed. He grinned, and for once I saw a future version of him, shoulders broader, voice sure. A man who'd learned his worth without borrowing someone else's mirror. Want me to distract them tomorrow morning? He asked. I have a late class. I can keep Mom out of the window. Please, I said. If you can steer her toward anywhere that isn't a front porch, you'll be my hero. He saluted. Consider it done. After he left, I finished the last box and stacked them by the door. The apartment felt cavernous without my tools and books, the skeletal outline of a life mid-migration. I sat cross-legged on the Factory. My phone chimed again. A text from Chloe. Truck acquired. I bribed 2 friends with pastries. They think it's just a light move. Perfect, I typed back. Front door's yours at noon. At dusk, I drove 1 box over to the new house, the first offering to a place that hadn't yet learned my habits. The sold sign caught the streetlight like a badge. Marjorie's office lockbox hung from the knob. Tomorrow it would be gone and I'd be the only person with a key that mattered. I carried the box, office, essentials, into the empty living room and set it carefully in the corner. The house hummed with its own quiet. I imagined the desk angled toward the front window, the chair positioned just so, the morning sun turning the paper edges gold. I imagined working there while the neighborhood woke up, my parents' street a suggestion at the edge of sightlines, no longer a gravity well. On the way back to my car, I caught my reflection in the dark window. A woman holding a box labeled with her future. No filters, no applause, no audience. Just an axis, shifting. Tomorrow at 10, I would turn a key. Tonight, I turned towards sleep, the kind that arrives only when a secret is ready to become a door. Friday morning began with a hum in the air, that electric kind of silence before something irreversible. My alarm went off at 6, but I was already awake, eyes tracing the ceiling cracks like routes on a map. This was it, the day the plans stopped being theory. By 7, the apartment was a skeleton of its former self. Walls bare, shelves empty, cardboard towers standing like patient soldiers. The movers arrived right on schedule, 2 quiet men with calm hands and a practiced rhythm. They didn't ask questions, they just lifted and loaded, efficient as a heartbeat. Everything going to one address? One asked, clipboard in hand. Yes, I said, handing him a printout. Hawthorne Lane. He nodded. Nice neighborhood. I smiled but didn't answer. Compliments on the view meant little when the landscape behind it was history I'd outgrown. At 9:45, I sent Eli a quick text. Me, leaving now. Status? Eli. Mom's dragging Madison to Home Goods. Dad's cleaning the gutters. Window threat neutralized. I laughed softly and typed back, You're the best. By 10 sharp, I pulled up in front of the gray house. Marjorie's car was already there, gleaming under a drizzle that had returned like clockwork. She stood at the gate, holding a small folder and a silver keychain shaped like a house. Morning, homeowner, she said with a grin. My throat tightened. Morning. We went through the last few documents on her clipboard, title deed, maintenance contacts, property disclosure forms. Then she handed me the keys. Cold metal, light in my palm, yet somehow heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Congratulations, Alex, she said. This is yours now. I turned the key in the lock. The door opened with a soft creak, like the house exhaling after holding its breath. Inside, the movers followed with boxes, their footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. Where do you want these? One asked. Living room corner's fine for now, I said. They stacked everything neatly, efficient and wordless. When they left, I stood in the doorway and listened to the hum of new electricity. My electricity. The refrigerator clicked on. The heater sighed. The pipes whispered awake. The sound of ownership. Chloe arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like pastries. "Couldn't show up empty-handed," she said. "Bless you," I said, taking a croissant. "Utilities are live. Internet guys due at noon. You're officially my first guest." She looked around, eyes wide. "It's perfect. It's so you. Minimalist but stubbornly alive." "High praise," I said, smiling. We carried boxes together for an hour. Books to shelves, coffee mugs to cupboards. Small items to places that made sense only to me. Each movement felt ceremonial. Each unpacked item a statement. I exist here now. By noon, the internet installer came and went. The rekeying service arrived promptly at 2, and by 3, the house hummed with quiet order. I stood in the living room, surrounded by half-open boxes and the scent of new beginnings. Then came the part I hadn't rehearsed, the silence. It wasn't the uneasy kind that lingered after family arguments, or the pressured kind that filled dinner tables. This silence was space, room to breathe without performance. I took the turquoise notebook from my bag and wrote on my new action on the fresh page. I laughed at my own formality, the accountant in me refusing to retire even on emotional occasions. Chloe was leaning against the counter, sipping coffee. "So," she said, "when are you going to tell them?" I thought about it. The inevitable call, the shock in my mother's voice, the denial in my father's. "Not yet," I said. "They'll find out when they look out the window." "Damn," she said softly, smiling. "That's poetic." "It's math," I said. "Visibility equals independence squared." She raised her cup. "Two equations that balance." We toasted with coffee instead of champagne. That night after she left, I sat on the floor with a single lamp glowing. The boxes were still half unpacked, the air faintly scented with paint and coffee. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, familiar and strange at once. I walked to the window. Across the street, my parents' house glowed warmly, unaware. A silhouette moved past the window. Madison, probably testing her lighting for another recording. I didn't feel bitterness, only gratitude. Her stage had taught me what kind of light I wanted for myself. I pressed my hand to the cold glass, feeling the subtle vibration of rain against it. For years, I'd mistaken proximity for belonging. Now I knew. Belonging isn't inherited, it's built. One signature, one box, one quiet morning at a time. The heater hummed. I whispered into the stillness, "Welcome home, Alex." And for the first time, the words didn't echo. They settled. Sunday morning dawned gray, the kind of weather that blurred everything into equal shades of uncertainty. I hadn't meant to wake early, but habit pulled me out of bed before 7. The house was still quiet, my house, and for a moment I just stood in the kitchen, barefoot, hands wrapped around a mug, staring at the steam curling into the cold air. I'd been here 2 days, and already the silence had begun to take shape. It wasn't emptiness, it was texture, the kind that let you hear your own thoughts without interference. Across the street, through the faint drizzle, I could see my parents' house. Lights on, movement inside. Sunday meant ritual, coffee, pancakes, controlled conversation. The same choreography I'd been part of for 27 years. Today, I was missing from the stage. I sat by the front window, watching the neighborhood come alive. The street shimmered with wet light, kids in raincoats splashing near the curb, a dog shaking off water as its owner laughed. It was ordinary, and that was the beauty of it. Ordinary without permission. At 9, my phone buzzed. Mom. "Morning, sweetheart. Are you on your way?" I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "Can't make it. Tight deadline." The 3 dots blinked. Then, "Again? We miss you. Madison wants to show you the studio. It's beautiful." I typed, I'm sure it is, but didn't send it. Instead, I slipped the phone face down on the table. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. Not yet. By noon, I was unpacking books in the office when the first knock came. Not at the door, but across the street. Through the blinds, I saw my father on a ladder, clearing gutters, glancing occasionally toward my new house. Madison appeared in the yard, phone in hand, her expression curious as she squinted across the street. For the first time, it struck me how visible this house was from theirs. I hadn't realized the angle of the street allowed such a clear line of sight. My stomach tightened, not from guilt, but from the inevitability of discovery. An hour later, I was in the living room assembling a bookshelf when my phone rang. It was Eli. "You're about to be spotted," he said, his tone half laugh, half warning. "Mom just realized someone moved into the gray house." I froze. That was fast. She's on the porch right now with her coffee. I give it 10 seconds before she gets the binoculars. I snorted. She doesn't have binoculars. She does now. Madison bought some for brand photography. You've got about 5 minutes of peace left. I leaned against the window frame, a nervous laugh escaping me. "You shouldn't be telling me this." He lowered his voice. "Are you kidding? I live for this kind of drama. Just maybe don't walk past the window for a while." "Copy that," I said, smiling despite myself. By evening, I'd mostly forgotten the tension. Chloe dropped by with Thai takeout and we sat on the floor, cross-legged among half-empty boxes. She raised her chopsticks toward the ceiling. "To the calm before the family storm." "I think the storm's already forming," I said. She grinned. "You knew this would happen." "I did," I admitted. "But knowing and feeling it, those are two different currencies." We ate quietly for a while. Outside, dusk pooled around the houses, streetlights flickering on one by one. I caught a flash of movement across the street. My mother, framed in her living room window, phone pressed to her ear. Even from here, I could imagine the conversation. Who could it be? Did someone really buy that old house? Chloe followed my gaze. "She'll figure it out soon, huh?" "Probably," I said. "And when she does—" I trailed off, letting the sentence dissolve. "You'll handle it," she said simply. "You always do." After she left, I wandered through each room, switching off lights, touching the edges of furniture I'd chosen myself. The house felt less like a secret now and more like a quiet defiance, a fact that would eventually stop being scandalous and start being normal. I stopped by the front door before bed, peering through the glass panel. Across the street, the Thompson house was dark except for the faint blue glow of Madison's studio lights. I could see her silhouette moving behind the curtain, animated, thriving in her element. Good for her, I thought. Let her build her version of visibility. I had built mine, one that didn't need applause. I turned off the porch light, the last symbol of invitation, and whispered into the dim room, "Let them wonder." The house didn't echo. It absorbed the words, quietly on my side. 3 weeks can change a neighborhood. Lawns shift from winter stubbled to green, porch plants appear in bright ceramic pots, and the mail carrier starts greeting you by name. By the third Sunday in my gray house on Hawthorne Lane, I'd learned the rhythms, the early dog walkers, the kid with the skateboard, the exact minute the streetlights blinked on like a polite suggestion. Other rhythms changed, too. I no longer checked my phone waiting for permission to exist. Work filled the rooms in a new way. Morning lights slid across my office floor as I met with clients on video, founders worried about runway, nonprofits sorting restricted funds, a couple planning to open a bakery in Tacoma who said my spreadsheets made them feel brave. I had begun mentoring a junior consultant named Priya, a careful listener whose questions arrived like well-placed nails in a frame. "You're not just modeling numbers," I told her on our first session. "You're modeling calm." She smiled in a way that told me she heard it. On a drizzly Thursday afternoon, I walked to the corner cafe for a break and ran into Eli outside, hood up, a physics textbook under one arm. "Hey, homeowner," he said, hugging me with the kind of quick, strong embrace that belongs to people who don't need to narrate their love. We took a table by the window. He flipped the book open and pointed at a problem. "This one defeats me." I sketched a diagram on a napkin, translating variables into shapes. When it clicked, he leaned back, grinning. "You should teach." "I do," I said, nodding toward the street. "Just differently." His smile faded a notch. "Mom asked me to invite you to dinner again. She says things feel incomplete without you." The old word pricked, but not fatally. "Incomplete isn't the same as wrong," I said quietly. He nodded, picking at the corner of the napkin. "They're stressed. Money stuff. I think the studio investments are heavier than they expected." I had suspected as much when a lien notice addressed to my parents popped up in the public records feed I check for clients. I hadn't gone looking. It had found me anyway. Data does that when you live by numbers. I sipped my coffee, feeling the tug between compassion and boundaries. "I'm sorry they're stressed," I said, "and I'm not a lender." He laughed, short and rueful. "I didn't ask you to be." We walked back along Hawthorne Lane under one umbrella, the drizzle stitching a thin silver thread between houses. At my gate, he hesitated. "If things get loud over there," he said, closing the umbrella, "you can text me. I'll come sit on your porch and we'll talk about anything that isn't money." "Deal," I said, and meant it. The ripples widened on their own. 2 days later, Mom called. Her voice was bright. Too bright. "Sweetheart, quick favor. Your father and I could use a short-term plan, just to bridge some expenses while Madison recalibrates after a brand hiccup. You're so good with those charts." Recalibrates. A generous word for a sponsorship pulling out after verifying more metrics than Madison's agent anticipated. I looked at the glass of water on my desk, the meniscus held in a perfect arc by surface tension. "I'm happy to explain options," I said, "but not to fund them." A pause that stretched until I could feel its shape. "We're family," she said finally, softer. "Family supports family. Family respects boundaries," I said, gentler than the sentence's backbone. "I'll sit with you to outline a budget. I won't absorb it." Her inhale sounded sharp, then smoothed. "All right," she said. "Sunday?" "Sunday," I agreed. I chose to meet them at a cafe, not the old dining room. Geography is part of the boundary. That evening, Chloe came by with a bottle of something sparkling and a paper bag of spring rolls. "Not champagne," she said, "but close enough to the idea." We ate at the counter while rain ticked against the window like a patient drummer. "How's Priya?" she asked between bites. "Sharp," I said. "She listens to the problem under the problem." Chloe nodded. "My favorite kind. Like you." I shrugged, smiling. "I'm learning." "Which is wild," she said, gesturing around the room. "Because you already did the thing everyone talks about doing. You made a life and you didn't ask anyone if it was okay." We washed the dishes together, easy as breathing. When she left, I lingered at the sink, palms flat on the cool edge, counting the steady seconds between raindrops. There was a time I would have called someone to fill the quiet. Now I understood the quiet was full. Sunday arrived with a thin sun and a long list of things I didn't need to rehearse. I met my parents at a cafe halfway between our houses. They were already seated, Mom's scarf arranged like punctuation, Dad's jaw set in an expression that used to make me small. It didn't anymore. We spoke in numbers first. I drew columns on a legal pad, fixed, variable, discretionary, and asked questions. They answered defensively, then honestly, then with a kind of weary relief that surprised us all. When Madison's name came up, I didn't say "I told you so." I said, "What's sustainable?" and waited until they answered for themselves. Near the end, Mom looked at me over the top of her cup. "I miss Sunday dinners," she said, voice threaded with something truer than performance. "I miss the parts that were real," I said. "We could try again with new rules." Dad cleared his throat, not quite ready to admit that rules had ever applied to him. "Such as?" "I don't surrender my space," I said. "I don't fund your choices, and you don't grade my worth by how quietly I sit." It was quiet then, not hostile, just a silence we hadn't earned before. "We can try," Mom said. And for once, it wasn't a tactic. It was a beginning. Back on Hawthorne Lane, the light slanted gold over the pavement, the kind of evening that tricked you into believing summer had arrived early. I stood on my porch for a long time, listening to a neighbor's wind chimes and the far-off thud of a basketball. Across the street, a ring light glowed faintly in an upstairs window, smaller than it used to look. The pond was still. The ripples kept moving, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to steady the water for anyone but me. The week after that cafe meeting felt strangely suspended, like the pause between tides. I worked, I walked, I breathed, but something in the rhythm of my life had changed. Conversations with clients came easier. My voice carried new weight, less rehearsed, more owned. Priya sent me a message late Monday night. Client signed the deal. Your formula worked. I replied with a quiet, proud of you. The words startled me. How easily I could extend approval now that I no longer begged for it. By midweek, Chloe dropped by, arms full of grocery bags and unsolicited wisdom. You look lighter, she said, unpacking peppers and wine like an unlicensed therapist. I negotiated a boundary, I said. She grinned. And lived to tell the tale? Barely, but I think it held. We ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool evening air. Across the street, Madison's ring light glowed again, but dimmer this time. I caught fragments of her voice, slower, subdued, less sparkle. Chloe followed my gaze. That's your sister, right? I nodded. Her sponsorship fell through. She's regrouping. She'll bounce back, Chloe said, but maybe she'll notice the difference between brand and backbone this time. The comment lingered. Madison had always believed performance was proof of worth. I had believed invisibility was safety. Maybe both of us had been wrong. On Friday, Eli texted me. Dad asked me what fixed versus variable means. Think he's trying to impress you. I laughed out loud at my desk. Small ripples indeed. That evening, I invited Eli over for dinner. Just him this time. I cooked pasta, something simple, and he arrived with a pack of sparkling water and that cautious grin he wore when he had gossip. They're trying, he said before sitting down. Mom's learning to use budgeting apps. Dad's comparing mortgage rates. I blinked. That's surreal. Yeah, he said, twirling pasta. It's like they realized responsibility isn't contagious. They have to build it themselves. We ate quietly for a moment, the hum of the heater blending with the rain outside. Then he said, You know, I think they finally see you. I leaned back. Or they see the version of me they can understand, financially stable, polite, predictable. He tilted his head. Is that so bad? Not bad, I said. Just incomplete. After he left, I wandered through the house, turning off lights. In the office, my computer screen still glowed faintly with open spreadsheets. I minimized the windows, revealing the blank desktop behind them. The emptiness felt earned. Saturday brought an unexpected knock. I opened the door to find Madison standing there. No makeup, hoodie damp from rain, expression brittle. Can I come in? She asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She looked around, eyes scanning the half-furnished room, the framed photo of Chloe and me on the counter, the orderliness she used to mock. It's nice, she said finally. You always liked quiet, huh? It likes me back now, I said. She huffed a laugh, then pulled a folded envelope from her pocket. Mom wanted me to bring this, some mail that went to your old room. But, she hesitated. That's not really why I came. I waited. I messed up, she said, voice cracking. I thought I was unstoppable. Turns out followers don't pay taxes and sponsors bail fast. I'm sorry, Mads. She looked up, eyes shining. You always sound sorry for things that aren't your fault. I smiled faintly. Occupational hazard. Silence settled, different from the ones we used to share. Not competition, not judgment, just space. Finally, she said, I used to think you were boring. Now I think you're brave. The sentence hit somewhere deep. Thanks, I said quietly. That means more than you know. She nodded, eyes drifting toward the window where our parents' house glowed faintly through the mist. They're trying too hard to pretend everything's fine. Maybe it will be, though. Maybe, I said, if everyone stops pretending. She gave a small, watery laugh. You always did hate pretending. When she left, I stood in the doorway watching her jog across the street, hood pulled tight. The air smelled like wet cedar and new beginnings. Inside, I sat at the desk and traced a fingertip along the wood grain, feeling its smooth certainty. I didn't reach for the turquoise notebook. The reflection lived elsewhere now, in the steadiness of my breath, the quiet of my house, the slow healing of old patterns. Outside, the rain softened to mist. The pond had rippled, the current had shifted, and in the stillness after, I felt something vast and unfamiliar settling into place. Peace. Not earned by approval, but practiced daily, like balance. 2 months later, the house had learned me. Which step creaked if I rushed, how the afternoon light slid across the office wall like a slow clock, where the kettle should live so I didn't have to think about it. The quiet wasn't empty anymore. It was furnished with routine. I set out plates on the dining table, white, simple, and a bowl of berries that looked almost theatrical under the skylight. Chloe arrived first, balancing a bakery box on one hip and a bouquet of eucalyptus on the other. Host mode, she said, sniffing the greens. I approve of your aesthetic. It's called Clean Counters and Hope, I said, laughing. She peered into the living room. You really did it, Alex. You built a life that doesn't ask permission to exist. Before I could answer, Eli knocked, then let himself in like he'd been doing it all his life. He carried a paper sack of sparkling water and the self-conscious confidence of a 19-year-old figuring out where his feet go in the world. Brought the good flavors, he said, unloading cans with a flourish. Also, I got into the engineering program. Conditional acceptance, but still. I hugged him so fast the cans rattled. You did that yourself. Yeah, he said, grinning, but you made it feel possible. Priya arrived last, shy smile, fresh notebook tucked under her arm, the faint worry of a junior consultant who wasn't sure if brunch came with quizzes. I waved her in. No work today, I said. We're practicing victory. We ate in easy loops of conversation, forks tapping, stories knitting together. Priya told us her bakery clients had signed a lease. Eli shared that he'd started tutoring a classmate who was quietly brilliant and allergic to raising his hand. Chloe awarded everyone metaphorical merit badges like she was born to MC our small wins. Halfway through, my phone buzzed with an email from a longtime client. Your plan kept us steady when the grant fell through. Thank you for your independence. I set the phone face down, surprised by the phrasing. Independence, once a private currency, was becoming public tender. After dishes, we migrated to the porch. The day wore that particular late spring brightness that always felt like a promise. Wind chimes from 2 doors down chimed a simple, repeating melody. Across the street, my parents' car rolled past, slowly. I saw Dad at the wheel, Mom in sunglasses, their faces turned toward my porch. Eli lifted a hand in a small wave. They waved back, tentative but present, and kept driving. Chloe arched an eyebrow. Progress? Motion, I said. I'll take it. Priya leaned forward, elbows on knees. My parents check the lease papers like they'll dissolve if they don't stare hard enough. I pretend I don't see them doing it. It's easier for all of us. Let them, I said. Some people need to look at proof until it feels like truth. She considered that, nodded, and smiled. One more gear in place. After they left, I tidied the table with the practiced grace of someone who finally has time for unremarkable tasks. I carried 2 empty glasses to the sink, listening to the neighborhood breathe. Someone mowing a lawn, a kid practicing trumpet badly and earnestly. My phone pinged again. This time it was a notification. Madison posted a story. Curiosity 1. The clip was short, an empty pink room, her old ring light in a corner. The caption, "Recalibrating, new chapter." No glitter fonts, no brand tags. A quiet post from someone who had built a life around volume. I felt the old ache try to rise and then, surprisingly, fall away. We were both learning in public, just different audiences. A soft knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Dad stood on the step, hands in his jacket pockets, looking like a man who had practiced his opening sentence and lost it on the walk over.
"Hi," I said, stepping aside.
"Mom with you?" "Grocery store," he said. He stayed on the threshold, a respectful distance he wouldn't have measured a year ago. "We were out driving. Thought I'd see how you were." "I'm good," I said. It wasn't armor. It was accurate. He looked past me into the house, at the tidy living room, the small stack of books on the side table, the lack of drama. His mouth softened. "Your mother says the budget meeting helped. We're working on it." "I'm glad," I said, and I was. He cleared his throat. "You've done well, Alexandra." It wasn't lyrical. It didn't need to be. Something inside me unclenched anyway. "Thank you," I said, and watched the words land. He nodded once, like a man checking a box that mattered, then stepped back. "We'll let you get on with your day." "See you," I said, and meant that too. Not as a promise of weekly dinners, but as proof that we could pass each other on the street without pretending. The door closed with its soft, familiar click. I leaned against it for a breath, not overwhelmed, not triumphant, just steady. In the office, afternoon light stretched itself over the floorboards. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and reviewed a proposal for a nonprofit that wanted a new model for sustainability. The language came easily. I knew how to convert scarcity into structure, hope into calendar blocks. I knew how to leave room for the human parts. When the email sent, I didn't reach for a notebook or compose a mantra. I stood and walked through the house I had chosen, palming the banister that no one else would move, switching on the lamp that made the living room look like itself at dusk. Outside, a basketball thudded, then another, the sound of repetition earning fluency. I stepped onto the porch and sat, folding one leg beneath me. The street smelled faintly of cut grass and whatever the neighbor grilled on Sundays. Across the way, my parents' curtains were open. I could see silhouettes moving through their ordinary evening. We were all learning new choreography. Less performance, more balance. I didn't need to be center stage to know where I stood. The wind chimes lifted once, then settled. I stayed a while longer, watching light turn to a softer thing, and felt the rare satisfaction of a chapter that didn't need a plot twist to be complete. 6 months since the key turned, the house and I had settled into each other's patterns. The step near the hall still complained if I rushed it, but I didn't rush much anymore. My workday began with the kettle's low whistle, ended with a screen gone dim on purpose, not from exhaustion. I had learned to leave white space in my calendar and in my head. Outside, evening laid a thin gold over Hawthorne Lane. Kids rode bicycles in lazy figure eights. Somewhere a dog argued gently with a squirrel. In my office, the window was open an inch, and the air smelled like wet lavender from a neighbor's garden. I closed a client call, a nonprofit in Spokane, and watched the cursor blink in the empty chat box. When you stop performing, silence feels like a colleague. My phone buzzed with a message from Eli. "Got the scholarship. Don't tell Mom yet. Want to do it in person." I grinned at the screen long enough that my reflection smiled back. "Proud of you," I typed, and meant it the way scaffolding means to a building, quietly, completely. Downstairs, I set rice to simmer and chopped scallions with the familiarity of someone who's fed herself long enough to know what works. As the pan hissed, Mom's name appeared on my phone. We'd been speaking more lately. Polite, measured conversations that tested the strength of new rules. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, voice cautious like she was approaching a skittish bird. "Quick question. What's the difference between debt snowball and avalanche again?" I wiped my hands and leaned against the counter. Snowball, smallest balance first. Avalanche, highest interest first. Behavior versus math. "That's the phrase," she said, relieved. "Behavior versus math." Your father likes math. I need behavior. She hesitated. We're staying with it. I know, I said. I did know. Their budget had shaky lines but a sturdier spine. How are you? A small, unguarded exhale. Better, she said. Then, as if she'd rehearsed it. Madison was asking about you. I waited. She said she wants to talk. Not a production, her words. Maybe brunch? Your house? I glanced toward the dining room where sunlight fell over the table, plain and unremarkable and utterly mine. Tell her yes, I said. Sunday. When we hung up, I didn't pace or rehearse imaginary conversations. I stirred the rice and set 2 bowls, just in case I decided to practice hospitality on a random Tuesday. Later, I carried dinner to the porch. The night had the soft confidence of late summer. Wind chimes fussed over a single note and let it go. Across the street, my parents' curtains were open. I saw Dad pass through the living room with a stack of papers. He paused in the doorway and adjusted one frame by a fraction of an inch. The instinct to curate hadn't died. It had learned manners. Brunch came with a small, earnest punctuality. Madison arrived alone, hair in a knot, no ring light in tow. She stood on my step holding a paper bag like a peace offering. Scones, she said. I made them, don't panic. Come in, I said, and it didn't cost me anything. We ate at the table. Butter softened, jam opened with the pop of a seal giving up. For a minute, we were 2 ordinary women choosing between blueberry and apricot like it mattered. I'm doing entry-level marketing, she said finally, as if reporting weather. It's real. I like knowing what an hour costs. I nodded. There's a relief in math. She picked at a crumb, then looked up. I'm sorry, she said, for acting like your space was disposable, for thinking visibility was something I got to take from you. The apology landed clean. I let it stay. Thank you, I said. I'm sorry for the months I only spoke in door slams. She huffed a laugh. You did it quietly. I do everything quietly, I said, and we both smiled. We talked about work, mine, hers, and none of it turned into a scorecard. When she stood to rinse her plate, she paused in the doorway and looked back at the room. It suits you, she said. This life. It fits, I answered. Finally. After she left, I walked the perimeter of the rooms the way I sometimes do when the light is this exact color. The office, the kitchen, the unnecessary but beloved lamp by the couch. The house felt like a sentence I no longer had to defend. Evening edged in. I sat at my desk and opened Priya's latest draft, a sustainability plan written with a steady hand. In the margins, I left notes that were more questions than corrections. What does success feel like for them? Where does the model breathe? Mentoring had become a quiet proof. Independence multiplies when you stop guarding it. A car door closed outside. I looked up to see Dad crossing my walkway, hesitating at the gate like it might bite. He caught my eye through the window and lifted a hand, not a wave so much as a request. I met him on the porch. 2 minutes, he said. No ambushes. Deal. He stood with the posture of a man who had practiced humility in private. Your mother said the brunch went well. It did. He nodded. We're trying to be better neighbors, he said, and I understood he meant parents but could only get there through the metaphor. We're not entitled to your help. Boundaries aren't a punishment, I said. They're a map. He looked at the street, then back at me. I got very good at pretending. You got very good at leaving. I'm learning. Staying. The sentence was imperfect, and that was the point. I see that, I said. He tipped his head. Then I'll let you get back to your evening. He took a step, then added, without looking at me. We're proud, not performative, the other kind. When he'd gone, I stayed on the porch a long time, watching the sky trade gold for slate. Somewhere down the block, a basketball drummed its lesson. Repetition, adjustment, follow-through. A year ago, I would have reached for a notebook to prove I'd learned. Tonight, I just listened until the sound folded into the neighborhood's heartbeat. Inside, I switched off lights one by one. In the doorway of the office, I paused and glanced at the shelf where the turquoise notebook sat. Present, unnecessary. I didn't need to write to know. Independence had become ordinary. Identity wasn't a stance, it was how I carried my keys. Resilience wasn't a speech, it was my calendar with white space I refused to trade. I locked the front door, set the chain, and stood for a moment in the dark, feeling the house hold its shape around me. Across the street, a lamp flicked on in my parents' window. We were all, finally, learning to live with the lights we actually needed. A year to the week since the key turned, Hawthorne Lane wore its spring colors like it meant them. The maples out front had flushed a tender green, and the neighbors' wind chimes kept trying to learn a new song. Inside, the house moved with me as if we'd practiced. Kettle, plates, the soft thud of a cabinet closing in the kitchen I chose. I'd set the table for 6. White plates, linen napkins folded in quiet triangles, a bowl of roasted carrots slicked with honey and cumin, salmon resting under lemon slices that looked like coins of sunlight. Not pot roast, not ceremony, just food that tasted like my life. Chloe arrived first, carrying flowers and a bottle dressed in tissue paper. 12 months, she said, kissing my cheek. Your house has better posture than most people. It learned from you, I said. Eli followed, arm linked with a woman I'd heard about but not yet met. This is Layla, he said, half proud, half shy. She's the reason I remember to eat when I'm studying circuits. Layla laughed, offering a foil-wrapped loaf. Sourdough startup pre-IPO, she said. I liked her immediately. Priya came next, breathless from a delayed bus, cheeks bright. Signed, she said, lifting a folder like a trophy. The bakery loan. They used my plan. You used your plan, I corrected, and watched the words land in the place they were meant to. The doorbell rang again. I'd expected the timing, but still my hand hesitated on the knob. Mom stood there, cardigan neat, eyes careful. Dad hovered a step behind, carrying a pie boxed with a loop of string, as if he'd been assigned the job of arrive holding proof. Come in, I said, and meant it. Invitations weren't concessions anymore. They were choices. We gathered in the living room while the salmon rested. My parents took in the house the way they always had, inventorying, calibrating, but softer now, like they were checking their own assumptions, not my worth. Mom's eyes caught on the eucalyptus Chloe had arranged, then slid to the stack of books on the side table. Finance, essays, a gardening manual I was failing to follow. Beautiful, she said, not performing. You have a talent for peace. It took practice, I said. At the table, conversation moved the way a well-built boat moves on water. Some chop, no capsizing. Eli told a story about a lab experiment gone sideways. Layla rescued him with a punchline. Priya described the moment her clients signed, a tiny bakery family pressing pens like they were saying vows. Dad listened, really listened. When he did speak, he asked Priya, "What did you change in their budget to make the lender believe?" His tone was curious, not corrective. Discretionary spending, she said. And I showed seasonality. Lenders like to see that you can survive the months that don't sparkle. He nodded like a man who recognized himself in the chart. Midway through, Madison's name surfaced, not as an accusation, but as weather. Mom glanced at her hands. She's doing okay, she said. Work is different from brand, but she's learning the hours. She asked me to tell you she'll text. Tell her she can come by next time, I said, and felt no catch in my throat, no ghost of the old script. After dinner, we drifted to the porch with mugs and the pie that turned out to be apple, my mother's reliable magic. The evening was that gentle kind of light that makes everyone look kinder. Cars slid by, someone's radio pulsed from a block away. Basketball on pavement stitched space into rhythm. Dad leaned on the railing beside me. Your brother's scholarship, he said quietly. He told us. That's him. That's not us. It can be both, I said. He grew here. We all did. He nodded, staring at the street like a man whose maps had been redrawn in his sleep. I was very sure of wrong things, he said finally. Thank you for not funding them. I smiled at that. Because it was honest and because it sounded exactly like my father trying to apologize without losing his balance. Thank you for learning anyway. When the sky dipped toward indigo, Mom stood and brushed invisible crumbs from her lap. We'll leave you to your evening, she said. We're trying to be better at not staying until someone has to hint. You can stay, I said, and she shook her head. It's nicer to be invited again later, she said. And for the first time I heard not strategy but respect. We hugged in the doorway, awkward and real. Dad squeezed my shoulder with a hand that knew how to fix things and was just now learning how not to. They crossed the street to the house where we'd all learned the old choreography. The porch light came on as if to acknowledge the new one. Back inside, the others helped with dishes without debate. Priya stacked plates like a tidy thesis. Layla wrapped leftovers with an engineer's precision. Eli dried a mug and set it in the exact right spot without asking. Chloe caught my eye over the sink and lifted her eyebrows in that, "Look what you did" way. Only best friends can carry without making it about themselves.
When the house finally exhaled, guests gone, counters clean, silence returning as an equal, I walked through each room the way I had on my first night, but slower. In the office, I paused at the shelf. The turquoise notebook sat there, spine facing out. For a heartbeat, I reached toward it, then didn't. I didn't need to prove the circle. I was living inside it. By the front window, I watched Hawthorne Lane settle. The neighbor's porch light clicked off. Wind moved through the maples with a sound like pages turning. Across the street, my parents' bedroom lamp glowed a steady square. I thought of the first Sunday, of rosemary pot roast and a table where I made myself small to fit the chairs. I thought of the moment I chose a key over a roll. Independence had stopped being a shout and become a gate. Identity wasn't what I defended, it was how I arranged forks in my own kitchen. Resilience lived not in speeches, but in the quiet repetition of showing up for the life I built. I locked the door and felt the weight of the deadbolt settle into place, a sound I'll never take for granted. Then I turned off the last light and let the house hold me. Not as a secret, not as a statement, but as home.